Ethan Carter was a successful businessman. He owned a chain of gas stations and had built his empire from the ground up, working hard to turn each station into a money-making machine. His stations were known for their quality service and efficient management. Except for one. This particular station was a real mystery to him. Sales were low, shoplifting was frequent, and online reviews were terrible. Customers complained about long waits, unmotivated employees, and even rude attendants. Ethan had replaced almost the entire staff, invested in security cameras, and increased monitoring. But nothing changed. He reviewed the financial reports regularly and always noticed that something was wrong. The profits at this station were considerably lower than expected. This made Ethan feel like he was losing money without even understanding why. One night, frustrated with yet another wave of complaints, he drove to the station to see for himself what was happening. When he arrived, he parked in his car for a few minutes, watching from afar. The flow of customers didn't seem too bad, but the energy of the place was strange. He decided to go out and take a walk around the gas station, hiding his irritation. The employees seemed busy, but there was something in the air, an invisible tension. When he entered the convenience store, he noticed a group of young people standing near the liquor shelf, whispering and looking out of the corner of their eyes. He knew that look. It was the look of someone who was about to do something wrong. Before he could react, one of them took a can of energy drink and put it in his jacket pocket. Ethan approached slowly, unnoticed, and watched as another young man took a bag of chips and hid it under his shirt. These were thefts happening right in front of him. Ethan's blood boiled. How could this be happening right under the employees' noses? He turned to the cashier and saw a distracted attendant fiddling with his cell phone. This was why the gas station was sinking. At that moment, he knew he needed to take drastic action. Ethan left the convenience store feeling his blood boiling. How could no one notice these blatant thefts? He knew the numbers at the gas station were below expectations, but seeing the problem unfold right in front of him was another story. Back in the car, he tried to calm himself. He took a deep breath and thought about what to do next. Change the entire staff? Hire a security guard? Close the station altogether? None of those options seemed ideal. That night, he decided he needed to cool off. As usual, he met up with his old friend Jake Miller to watch a basketball game. The two had known each other for years. They had once been competitors in the auto parts business, but over time, they had built a friendship based on respect and exchanging business advice. In the middle of the game, between one play and another, Ethan let it out. "I'm on the verge of going crazy with one of my gas stations. Nothing I do can fix it." Jake, without taking his eyes off the court, took a sip of his beer and calmly answered, "Let me guess, thefts, unmotivated employees, complaining customers?" Ethan raised an eyebrow. "How do you know?" Jake smirked. "Because I've been there. And let me tell you, firing everyone and hiring a new team isn't going to solve it. It's not just the people who work there, it's the culture." Ethan crossed his arms. "Great, so how do I fix this?" Jake thought for a moment, then suggested, "You have experienced employees at other stations, right? People who have proven themselves to be trustworthy." "Yeah, then why don't you transfer some of them to this unit? Let someone you trust take the lead there and see what's really going on." Ethan fell silent. He'd never thought of that before. Making a strategic change instead of just firing everyone might be the solution. "That could work," he muttered, thinking. Jake smiled. "Trust me, Ethan. Sometimes the problem isn't the people, it's the way the environment works. Change the leadership, bring in someone who really understands how to make that station run, and watch the magic happen." Ethan nodded. It was time to test that theory. The next day, he gathered his management team and began selecting the best employees for a temporary transfer. But what he didn't know was that even with this change, a new and unexpected problem was about to arise. The next morning, Ethan gathered his trusted managers. He explained the situation and made it clear that he needed experienced and committed employees to turn around this troubled position. This wasn't just a staff change, but a mission to turn around a business that was on the brink of failure. Some employees were hesitant, but others embraced the challenge. Challenge right away. From among them, Ethan chose Ryan, an experienced manager who had dealt with similar issues at other locations. He also transferred 2 exemplary gas station attendants and a store attendant who was known for her friendliness and customer service. With the new staff, changes began to happen quickly. Ryan adjusted hours, improved security, and made a small renovation to make the station more organized and inviting. The new team was efficient, customers noticed the difference, and within a few weeks, reviews began to improve. However, a new problem arose, and her name was Lisa Harris. Lisa was one of the station's longtime employees. She had worked there for years and considered herself the one truly responsible for keeping everything running smoothly. Ever since the new team arrived, she began to feel like she was being left out. So this is how it's going to be now? They're bringing in outsiders like we're incompetent. Lisa grumbled to her co-workers. At first, Ethan didn't pay much attention. He thought Lisa would get used to the new dynamic. But he was wrong. Lisa began to make life difficult for the new employees. She refused to follow Ryan's orders, made harsh comments to the new attendants, and, worse, fueled a tense atmosphere among the team. One day, Ethan went to the gas station to see the changes up close. As soon as he arrived, he noticed that the atmosphere was still tense. He discreetly watched as Lisa, arms crossed, argued with Ryan in front of a few customers. He couldn't let this continue. "Lisa, can we talk for a minute?" Ethan asked, calling her into his office. Lisa rolled her eyes, but followed her boss. As soon as they entered the small room, Ethan got straight to the point. "I know you're unhappy, but I need you to understand that this change isn't against you. I want the station to grow, for everyone to grow. But if you keep making it difficult, I'll have no choice but to make another change, this time without you." Lisa was silent for a moment, but her expression showed no sign of regret. On the contrary, she seemed even more irritated. "I see, Mr. Carter." She left the office, slamming the door behind her. Ethan sighed. He knew that the problem was still unresolved. But what he didn't know was that very day, he would have an unexpected encounter with a stranger who would change his life forever. The day was already long for Ethan. He left the office after the tense conversation with Lisa and walked around the gas station, observing the movement. Despite the positive changes, he still felt that something was missing. Maybe it was just the wear and tear of the routine, or maybe that nagging feeling that another problem was about to appear. As he passed near the entrance of the convenience store, something caught his attention. A young woman sitting on the sidewalk near the gas pumps. She was hunched over, hugging her knees, looking at the ground as if she was deciding whether to go in or not. Her clothes were worn, but not completely torn. Her hair was long, a little disheveled, and her expression showed tiredness mixed with determination. Ethan stopped for a moment, observing her. It was common to see beggars in the area, but there was something different about her. Finally, he approached her and asked firmly but without hostility, "Do you need help?" The young woman looked up quickly, as if caught off guard. Her eyes were intense, but they held a weight that Ethan couldn't quite place. "Actually, yes." Her voice was hesitant but firm. "I wanted to know if there were any openings here. Any job. I'm a fast learner, and I'll do whatever it takes." The answer caught Ethan off guard. He had expected a request for money, not a job. He crossed his arms, considering the situation. "Do you have any experience working at gas stations?" The young woman shook her head. "No, but I've worked before at a few places. I don't have a resume, but I know I could do a good job." There was something about her sincerity that intrigued him. She wasn't trying to make up tall tales or play the victim. She was just asking for a chance. Ethan took a deep breath, considering. He didn't usually hire people without references or recommendations, but something in him told him to give her a chance. "What's your name?" "Emma Collins." "Okay, Emma, do you have any documents?" She hesitated for a moment. "I have an ID, but I don't have it right now." Ethan didn't answer right away. He didn't like the idea of hiring someone without documents right away, but he also didn't want to just ignore her. "Listen, this isn't a safe house, but if you really want a job, show up tomorrow with your documents and we can talk." To his surprise, a slight smile played across her lips. "Really? You're not just trying to get me? Dismiss? I'm not the type to just say things. If you show up tomorrow all set, we can figure out what to do." Emma nodded, as if that simple opportunity was all she needed to start over. Ethan took one last look at her before walking away. Little did he know that that seemingly simple decision would completely change his life. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the gas station earlier than usual. He didn't know why, but he wanted to see if Emma would really show up. Maybe it was just curiosity or the feeling that this young woman still held a mystery that he couldn't decipher. He busied himself reviewing some reports in the office, but every now and then he glanced out the window. Would she show up? Then, at 8 o'clock sharp, Emma showed up. She was wearing the same clothes as the day before, but she had tried to fix them as best she could. Her hair was tied up in a makeshift bun, and in her hands, she was holding some papers. Ethan left the office and walked over to her. "Good morning, Emma. Did you bring the documents?" She nodded and handed him the papers. Everything was in order. "Okay, let's talk in my office." As he looked over the documents, he asked, "Have you ever worked in anything like this before?" "Not a gas station, but I've worked in restaurants and stores. I learned quickly at all of them." Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying the young woman in front of him. There was something about her that he couldn't explain. She didn't look like your average job seeker. She looked like someone who had once had a different life and had somehow lost it all. "Okay, Emma, I'll give you a chance." Her eyes widened in surprise. "Really?" "Yes, but only for a trial period. If you do well, you can stay. The uniform is in the locker room. Ryan, the manager, will teach you the basics." Emma smiled sincerely. "Thank you very much, Mr. Carter. I won't disappoint." Ethan just nodded and walked her over to Ryan, explaining the situation. Ryan didn't look too excited, but he nodded. "Okay, come with me, Emma. We'll show you how things work." The first few days were challenging. Emma had no experience as a gas station attendant, but she was extremely observant and determined. Within a few days, she was quickly filling up cars, helping customers with questions, and even making small sales at the convenience store. But what really surprised everyone was her patience with Lisa Harris. Lisa, as always, turned her nose up at the new employee. "Great, another one to carry on my back," she muttered to Ryan. However, Emma didn't react. Always polite, she carried out her duties without letting Lisa's provocations get to her. And then, something no one expected happened. Lisa started to respect her. One day, Emma went to help a customer who was arguing with another employee about a payment error. Before the situation could get worse, she calmly intervened, explained everything, and resolved the problem. Lisa, who was watching from afar, crossed her arms and muttered to herself, "Well, at least she knows how to talk." At that moment, Ethan began to realize that Emma was not just any employee. He still didn't know who she really was or what her story was, but something told him that this girl wasn't there by chance. And little did he know that this was just the first of many surprises. The days went by, and Emma proved to be much more than just a good employee. She was exceptional. Her coworkers began to notice that she was a quick learner, worked without complaining, and was always willing to help. Customers liked her, the other attendants respected her dedication, and even Lisa, the most difficult employee at the station, began to treat her with a little more consideration. But what impressed Ethan the most was how Emma seemed to understand business. On a particularly busy day, Ryan realized that they were having a problem. There was a line of cars waiting to fill up, and customers were getting impatient. "This is chaos. We're going to lose customers," Ryan grumbled. Emma, who had been watching the situation, thought for a moment and suggested, "What if we put an employee to take payments before customers come to the pump? That way, they arrive ready, and the supply is faster." Ryan blinked, surprised by the idea. That could work, and it did. In less than an hour, the flow of cars improved, the lines were shorter, and the customers left satisfied. Ryan looked at Emma and shook his head, impressed. "Are you sure you've never worked with this before?" Emma just smiled. But Ethan, who was watching everything from afar, could no longer ignore the question that was going through his mind. Who was Emma Collins? The mystery that no one could explain despite her humble and reserved demeanor. There were small details that did not go unnoticed. For someone who said she had been through hardships, Emma spoke with great confidence, and she articulated her ideas well. She had a demeanor that reminded one of someone accustomed to leadership, and her suggestions were always impeccably reasoned. One day, while reviewing some documents in the office, Ethan realized that he had begun to think of her more than he should have. Not only as a talented employee, but as someone who seemed to have a much bigger story than she let on. He decided to test his theory. At the end of the workday, as Emma was packing up her things to leave, Ethan approached her casually. "Emma, I never asked, but why did you want this job?" She hesitated for a moment before answering. "Because I needed it." "Yes, but did you need any job or this job?" Emma looked up and met Ethan's curious gaze. For a moment, she seemed about to say something, but changed her mind. "I just needed a chance." Ethan sensed that she was hiding something, but decided not to press. After all, in a few days, everyone would be in for a big surprise. The company's corporate party was coming up, and Emma was on the guest list. And Ethan was about to see a version of her he never imagined. The week passed quickly, and before Ethan knew it, the company's annual ball was about to take place. It was a traditional event where employees and business partners gathered for a night of celebration, awards, and recognition of the year's top performers. As usual, the guest list included all employees from his network of service stations, including the newest addition to the team, Emma Collins. Ethan wasn't sure if she would attend. She never seemed interested in socializing outside of work and avoided talking about her personal life. But for some reason, he was curious to see if she would show up. An unforgettable arrival on the night of the event, the ballroom was immaculate. Golden lights illuminated the high ceiling, and the sound of conversation and laughter filled the room. Employees were dressed in their finest attire. Ethan was busy greeting a few guests when suddenly the room fell silent for a few seconds. He frowned and looked in the direction of the surprised looks. And then he saw her. Emma. But not the Emma from the gas station. The woman who walked into the salon looked like a completely different version of a young woman with the plain uniform and the tired face. Her hair, which had always been pinned up in a practical way, now fell in glossy waves over her shoulders. Her makeup was subtle, but it highlighted features Ethan had never really noticed before. And her dress? It was sophisticated, elegant, expensive. She walked into the salon with the air of someone who had been to events like this before. Ethan was speechless. He wasn't the only one. Lisa, Ryan, and the other employees at the gas station were just as shocked as he was. As Emma approached, Ethan could tell she was enjoying the reaction of the crowd. "Good evening, Mr. Carter," she said with a slight smile. Her voice was the same, but it sounded different now. Ethan needed a moment to compose himself. "Emma, I almost didn't recognize you." She let out a soft laugh. "I noticed." He crossed his arms and looked at her curiously. "I think it's time you told me who you really are." She held his gaze for a few seconds before finally answering. "Have you ever heard of William Collins?" Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. Of course he had heard of him. William Collins was one of the richest businessmen in the country, owner of a chain of luxury hotels and other million-dollar investments. "What does he have to do with you?" Ethan asked, already feeling like he knew the answer. Emma took a deep breath before saying, "He's my father." The shock was immediate. Ethan was silent, trying to process the information. Emma Collins, the same young woman who worked as a gas station attendant, was the daughter of a billionaire? What was she doing there? Ethan couldn't understand. If she had so much money, why was she working at a gas station? As if reading his mind, Emma smiled slightly. "I think we need a longer conversation, don't you think?" Ethan just nodded, knowing that that night would still bring many revelations, and that, after that conversation, nothing would ever be the same again. Ethan was still trying to absorb what he had just heard. Emma Collins was the daughter of William Collins, one of the richest men in the country. The humble, hard-working young gas station attendant who seemed to have come from nowhere actually belonged to one of the largest financial empires. "I think I need a drink to process this," he murmured, leading her to a more private corner of the room. Emma smiled, as if she had already expected that reaction. "I'll make it easy for you, Ethan. I'm not here by accident." He crossed his arms, now more intrigued than ever. "So, tell me, why an heiress?" Billionaire stopped at a gas station, asking for a job as a gas station attendant. Emma took a deep breath before starting her story. "A past of luxury and an abrupt cut. Throughout my life, I never had to worry about money. I had the best education, the best teachers, the the best dresses. Ethan nodded. He could already imagine that. But there was a problem. My father always wanted me to follow the family business, to become a businesswoman like him. The problem is that I never had a choice. Everything was decided by him. Emma paused, looking at the glass in her hands before continuing. There was a big fight. I said I wanted to build something of my own, without depending on his money. He laughed. He said I would never know how to survive in the real world without his fortune. Emma's eyes grew a little more intense. So I did what any impulsive young woman would do. I cut off all contact and left home. Ethan's eyes widened. Did you really leave? With nothing? Nothing. I thought it would be easy, that I would find a job, rent a small apartment, and move on with my life. She let out a humorless laugh. But I was naive. Within a few months, I was broke. I couldn't get a job without experience. I was rejected in interviews because I'd never really worked before. And then I discovered the other side of life. Ethan listened in silence. Now everything made sense. So you ended up at my station? Yes. I was already surviving on temporary jobs, but none of them taught me what I really wanted to learn, how to run a business from scratch. She looked at him seriously. When I saw your station, I knew there was more I could learn about management, customer flow, logistics. I wanted to see how things really worked on the ground. Ethan shook his head in disbelief. So you chose to work with me as an experiment? Not only that, I needed a job. But yes, I knew I would learn a lot there. Ethan ran a hand over his face. And your father? Did he know where you were the whole time? Emma looked away. Yes. I found out a little while ago that he knew everything. He just decided to wait and see how far I would go. Ethan was silent for a moment. So what now? What are you going to do? Go back to your old life? Emma smiled slightly. I don't think I've finished what I started yet. He raised an eyebrow. And what exactly did you start? Emma looked at him directly. I have a proposition for you, Ethan. But before I tell you, I want to know, do you think I'm just a billionaire's daughter playing at being poor? Ethan stared at her for a long moment before answering. No, I think you're much more than that. Emma smiled. Good, because this proposition could change our lives. And then she began to explain. And Ethan realized he was about to walk into something much bigger than he had ever imagined. Ethan leaned forward, his eyes fixed on Emma. He already knew this conversation would change everything, but he had no idea what was coming. I'm listening. What's your proposition? He said, crossing his arms. Emma took a deep breath and began. I spent months observing your gas station and learned more than I imagined. You have a solid but limited business. Your gas station network could grow much more if you had the right structure. Ethan raised an eyebrow in interest. Keep going. You have an incredible base. Your employees are well-trained. Your customers are loyal, but you are not taking advantage of its full potential. She paused before dropping the bombshell. What if I told you that we can transform your network into something much bigger? We can expand, create a more efficient system, and even bring in investors. But to do that, you need a partner who understands the big business market. Ethan blinked. And that partner would be you? Emma smiled. Exactly. He laughed, surprised. So you're telling me that after months working as a gas station attendant, you want to become my partner? I don't want to. She leaned forward a little. I will. Her tone was not arrogant, but absolute certainty. I know how this market works, Ethan. I know how big companies operate. If you trust me, we can transform your gas station network into something you never imagined. Ethan was silent for a moment. The idea was insane, but it made sense. He knew Emma had knowledge, and above all, she had something few had, vision. And what do you gain from this? He asked. Emma smiled at the corner of her mouth. The satisfaction of proving to my father that I am capable. And, of course, building something that is truly mine. Ethan stared at the glass of wine in his hands, lost in thought. It was a risk, but it wasn't a bad risk. Finally, he looked up at her. Okay, Emma Collins, you have my attention. But before we enter into this agreement, there is something I need to know. She looked at him curiously. What? Ethan took a deep breath. What if I told you that, besides business, I want something more from you? Emma froze. She hadn't expected that. For a moment, the young billionaire, who had always had everything under control, looked lost. You're saying that I'm saying that maybe I've spent too much time pretending that I'm not interested in you. Emma didn't know what to say. She had never planned this. But before she could think of a response, Ethan leaned closer and whispered, "So what do you say?" She looked at him for a long moment. Her mind was telling her to think about business, but her heart was telling her otherwise. And then, for the first time, Emma allowed herself to choose without fear. "I'm saying that you took too long to ask." Ethan smiled. That night, they sealed not just a business deal, but a new beginning. Emma was still trying to understand what had just happened. She had expected Ethan to accept her business proposal, but she had never imagined that he would open the door for something more. For months, she had focused solely on proving herself, on showing that she could survive without her father, without money, without privileges. But now, for the first time, someone didn't just see the rebellious heiress trying to fit in with the real world. Ethan saw Emma, the real Emma. She smiled. "If this is a deal, Mr. Carter, I hope you read between the lines." He laughed. "And what were the lines?" "That I'm not an easy partner." "Good. Neither am I." They toasted, and that night, everything changed. A new stage the next few days were a mix of business and discovery. Emma immersed herself in the details of Ethan's company. She outlined a strategic plan to expand the network of gas stations, improve process efficiency, and attract new investors. Ethan, in turn, discovered that he enjoyed her presence more than he should have. What began as a business partnership quickly turned into something deeper. They became inseparable, and the chemistry between them was undeniable. But there was one last piece of the puzzle that Emma needed to solve. Reconciliation with her father one day. While reviewing documents in Ethan's office, Emma received an unexpected call. She glanced at her phone screen and felt her heart race. William Collins. For a moment, she considered ignoring it, but then she took a deep breath and answered. "Hello." On the other end of the line, her father's firm voice sounded calm, but full of meaning. "My daughter, it's time we talked." Emma closed her eyes for a moment before answering. "Yes, father. It is time." The next day, Emma and William Collins met at a discreet restaurant. The man she had always seen as untouchable seemed different. "I watched everything you've done," he began, "and I admit, you surprised me." Emma kept his gaze steady. "I told you I could do it." "Yes, and you did." He took a deep breath and continued. "I know I was hard on you. I just wanted you to be prepared for the real world. But I see now that, deep down, I never gave you the chance to try." Emma didn't answer right away. For years, she had been waiting for this moment. But now that it was happening, she realized she no longer needed his approval. She had already proven herself, and her father knew it. Finally, William smiled slightly. "I just want to know, are you happy?" Emma looked at him, surprised by the question. And then she thought of Ethan, of everything he had built, of the future that now lay before her. She smiled. "Yes, Dad. For the first time in my life, I am." An ending and a new beginning months later, Ethan and Emma stood side by side, watching the grand opening of the first major expansion of the gas stations. Their plan had worked. Emma had proven she could do it. Ethan had proven he was willing to grow. And together, they realized they had found something much bigger than business. "This all seems a little surreal," Ethan commented, looking out at the event full of customers and investors. Emma laughed. "Well, I always like unexpected endings." He took her hand. "Then I hope this is just the beginning." She squeezed his hand back and knew it was.